Lesson 8.1, metric units of length. In our country, when we think about measuring length, we usually think of inches and feet, maybe yards and miles if we're getting into larger lengths. But in other places in the world, the metric system is the most commonly used system for measuring length. And we're going to look at within the metric system, what are the most common units that we tend to deal with in everyday life. Taking a look at our handy dandy classroom ruler, you have this side of the ruler labeled in centimeters. The space between 0 and 1 is 1 centimeter. For me, that's about the width of the fingernail on my pinky finger. Now, believe it or not, there's actually a unit even smaller than a centimeter, and that's a millimeter. Look at these tiny spaces here. 1 millimeter broken up into 10 equal parts. Each of those equal parts is a millimeter. So you could say that 10 millimeters equals 1 centimeter. For me, the length of a millimeter, this tiny space between these little lines, is about the thickness of a fingernail. So when I think about these two tiny units, a millimeter, I think about a thickness of a fingernail, centimeter. I think about the width of my pinky fingernail. Now, moving on up from millimeters and centimeters, we get to a meter. A meter stick. Every classroom has a meter stick. Sometimes we call it a yardstick because we tend to use that unit more commonly in our country, inches, feet, yards. But it is also a stick that shows the length of a meter. 100 centimeters, and I've got this written up here, is 1 meter. And then going larger than a meter, 1,000 meters equals 1 kilometer. Many of you may have run a 5K race in your life. Well, 5K is 5 kilometers, right? 1K or 1 kilometer is like having 1,000 meter sticks back to back to back. And there you have it. Now, other than having these conversions memorized, which you will need to, the other thing to know is whether you are going to need to use multiplication or division. If you are starting with a smaller unit and going to a larger unit, smaller to larger, you're going to divide. I'm going to say equals division. And then the opposite is true. If I'm starting with a larger unit and I'm going to a smaller one, then I will multiply. Okay. I've worked out the first four. Let's take a look at them together. Number one, 60 centimeters equals how many meters? Well, here I'm starting with centimeters and I'm converting it to meters. So I'm going smaller to larger. Smaller to larger means division. Well, I take 60 and divide it by what? That's where I have to know this conversion, centimeters to meters. 60 divided by 100. Okay, well, 60 divided by 100, I'm counting my zeros, 2 zeros. Imagine a decimal point here going 2 pushes to the left, and I get 0 and 6/10 of a meter. Number two, again, starting with a smaller unit and converting to a larger unit, think division. Divide by what? Divide my 785 by 100. 785 divided by 100. Count my zeros. Imagine my decimal point being pushed 2 places to the left. 785 centimeters equals 7 and 85 hundredths meters. Number three. Here I'm starting with a larger unit, a kilometer, and I'm converting to a smaller unit. How do I know that? Well, because if I'm going from larger to smaller, I'm going to be using multiplication. Clearly, I'm using multiplication here because I'm starting with the value of 214 and I'm ending with a value of 214,000. I'm multiplying this by 1,000. So my unit has to be kilometers. Or sorry, my unit has to be meters. Number 4, I'm going from millimeters to centimeters, so I'm going smaller to larger. Think division. Divide by what? Well, 10 millimeters equals 1 centimeter, so I've got to divide by 10. If I take 97 hundredths and I divide by 10, count my zeros, push my decimal point one place to the left, and I get my answer of 97 hundredths centimeters. Number 5, 7 and 5/10 centimeters equals how many millimeters? I'm going larger unit to smaller units. Think multiply. Multiply by what? Well, centimeters to millimeters. Multiply by 10. Take 7 and 5/10 and multiply by 10. That means pushing the decimal point one place to the right. Meters to millimeters. Larger unit to smaller unit. Think multiply. Multiply by what? Well, meters to millimeters. I don't have that one written up here, but I do know that 1 meter equals 100 centimeters, and 1 centimeter equals 10 millimeters. So put those two statements together. 1 meter equals 1,000 millimeters. I can write that here. 100 times 10. 1,000 millimeters equals 1 meter. So I'm going to take 90 and multiply it by 1,000. I'll get 90,000. Now the opposite is true here. If I'm going millimeters to meters, I'm going a smaller unit to a larger unit. Think division. Divide by what? Well, divide by 1,000. Imagine a decimal point here. If I'm dividing by 1,000, I've got to shift the decimal point 3 places to the left. And I get 85 hundredths of a meter. Number 8, I'm going meters to kilometers. Smaller to larger, think division. Divide by what? Well, meters to kilometers, divide by 1,000. So imagine my decimal point here, and I'm going to shift that 3 places to the left. 9 and 14 hundredths. Number 9, smaller unit to a larger unit. Think division. Divide by what? Millimeters to centimeters. Divide by 10. So my decimal points here, I've got to push that 1 place to the left. And finally, there's a mystery unit here. I'm going from centimeters to something. The value of what I'm starting with is increasing by 10, isn't it? I'm taking this and I'm pushing the decimal point 1 spot to the right, which means I'm multiplying by 10. So what does this unit have to be? Smaller to larger, or sorry, since I'm multiplying, I'm going a larger unit to a smaller unit. Well, what's smaller than a centimeter? A millimeter. Does that check out? Am I multiplying by 10? Yes, I am. So my mystery unit here is millimeters. And let's take a look at, how about the first 2 word problems before we wrap up. Edward rode 208 meters farther than Virgil. Virgil rode for 1 3/10 kilometers. How many meters did Edward row? Estimate to check your answer. Okay, so the key is they want us to give a final answer in terms of meters. So the first thing we're going to need to do is take this amount and convert it into meters. So 1 3/10 kilometers is how many meters? Well, 1 3/10 kilometers equals how many meters? Larger unit to a smaller unit, I need to multiply. Multiply by what? Well, 1,000 meters go into 1 kilometer, multiply by 1,000. So take the decimal point and shift it 3 places. 1, 2, 3, 1,300 meters. Okay. Now Edward rode 208 meters farther than this amount. So my estimate, could round this down to 200. My estimate is 1,500. And my actual, well, let's take 1,300 and let's add 208. 0 and 8 is 8, 0 and 0 is 0, 3 and 2 is 5. My actual is very close to my estimate. Actual is 1,508 meters. Number 12, on each of 5 days, oh, this is a cool name, Chikumbutso rode 2 and 94 hundredths kilometers to work, 2 and 8 tenths kilometers to pick up his kids, and then 500 meters back home. How many kilometers, underline that, did he ride for the 5 days altogether? Okay, so the first two activities are already in kilometers, but I've got to convert this into kilometers. Well, 500 meters, which is a smaller unit, needs to be converted to kilometers, which is a larger unit. Smaller to larger, think division. Divide by 1,000. So imagine my decimal point here. Whoop, whoop, whoop. 3 pushes. 500 meters is 5/10 of a kilometer. And if I did a quick estimate of this, this is close to 3. This is close to 3. 3 and 3 is 6. This is 0.5. So I'd say 6.5 kilometers is my estimate. Now let's do the actual. Let's stack it by place value. So I've got 2 and 94 hundredths. I've got 2 and 8 tenths. And I've got 5 tenths. Put my zeros here. And 4 and 0 and 0 is 4. 9 and 8 is 17. 17 and 5 is 22. My actual comes out just a bit under my estimate, 6 and 24 hundredths kilometers.